All right. Hi, everybody. And I want to say thank you to Guy, who has stepped in and joined our panel at the very last moment. I want to explore this idea about how we can build AI platforms together for everyone. And I'm going to break that down bit by bit so you know where I'm coming from. So it's no secret that the expectations for AI are sky high. And not just in the private sector, but also in the public sector. The UK government announced its AI Opportunities Action Plan last month. They announced £25 billion worth of investment in UK data centres, £14 billion worth of investment in AI jobs and new jobs created. So the expectations now are massive, even compared to a few years ago. And the frontier models that are being trained now take 10,000 times more computing power than they did in 2019. And we have to deliver on all these expectations. So what is that future going to look like in another 5 years' time? Well, today we kind of have a few options. One is to go these kind of closed source models and closed source providers. And that has some benefits because it gives you more time to get to market faster. But there's also this open source paradigm which gives you more choice, more flexibility over your platform. And for certain regulated industries, for people who need to control, keep their stuff inside Europe for GDPR reasons, they don't necessarily have the option of being able to use the closed source platforms that exist today. So how can we expand AI so that everybody who can make use of it can do? Together. I come from a Kubernetes background myself, and Kubernetes was a transformative moment for our industry. It brought open standards, interoperability, and more than that, it created a culture of open innovation, a whole ecosystem of startups and investment. The question is, will AI also have this Kubernetes moment where the community gets together behind this open standards and platforms, and everybody contributes, and everybody can win and contribute to that? So that is my question that I posed to my panelists, and I'm very excited to hear their thoughts and what they think about it. So for myself, I'm Cheryl Hung. I'm going to do some intros. I'm Cheryl Hung. In addition to my day job at Arm, I'm also the founder of Cloud Native London, a 9,000-person meetup in London, and I'm a previous software engineer at Google and Apple and VP at the Linux Foundation. Tollis, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. I'm Tollis Christomanos. I'm a senior solutions architect at Amazon Web Services. I specialize in game development, and I'm working with customers from game studios and betting and gaming industry to run, build, grow the games on AWS. I have more than 2 decades on the game industry, so I've been involved into many platforms to run games on. And also I've seen the whole evolution of game, because game developers are the first ones who will embrace AI and ML for the games. So yeah, that's for me.
Thank you. Next up, Mitch.
Hi everyone, I'm Michel Murabito, but everyone call me Mitch. And I am a developer advocate in a company called Mia Platform, and I'm a CNCF ambassador. With the company, we started to work and add to our products AI. And for us, it's not business critical, and we start to release all the stuff as open source. I'm very active inside the communities. I'm organized the KCD in Italy and co-organized the KCD in San Francisco, and yeah, a lot of stuff.
All right, and Guy, do you want to introduce yourself?
I think I've just introduced myself. Yeah, I don't know if people. I'm CEO and founder of Tessel, previously the founder of Sneak.
All right, so we have a couple of different viewpoints here. We have kind of the user viewpoint, we have the vendor viewpoint. Perhaps vendor's a bit early to say that, but my hope is to sort of get a couple of different viewpoints to capture this question. So we're going to primarily focus on Gen AI and LLMs. I know I've said AI, I don't mean the whole of AI. And we're going to talk about 3 different areas. So data and security, architectural paradigms, and then the economics and environmental sustainability. Let's start with data and security. And Mitch, I'm going to start with you. So what are your thoughts about, for example, data sets?
Okay, before starting, there is no AI without data at the end. And the data is very important stuff for generate models and to create systems like RAG and so on. And at this moment, there is a couple of data sets like open data, but there is no sufficient data to allow to small company and startup to create their own models. When we talk about data, in the majority of the case, we talk about generate new models. And at this moment, the majority of the models are generated from big companies that can have access to a large number of data. And let me say, when we talk about data, we don't talk just about data, because if you want to search any kind of information, you can go on Google or Bing or I don't know, and you can search your query and you can find 1,000 of websites that have answer for you. But at this moment, the data is not enough if you don't have also good data and metadata inside to understand how the data means and how you can use data. As an open source community, we have a lot of formats like JSON, CSV. If you think about this kind of format, it's a standard at this moment. But for the AI, I think that we have a lot of work to do because as a community, we can try to improve this model, this data set, add the data, and let me say, have more ethical data without copyrights and so on. Again, there is no AI without data, and as an open source, we need to allow also to small companies and startup, also research company and so on, to have a good quality data to create our future inside AI.
Tollis, I know that you've looked into the ethical and the bias side of it as well. So could you talk about what that would look like, what open could help there?
Yeah. More general, like security. When you build an AI platform, security needs to be priority 1. Everything that you do, it has to, from data collection down to model inference, you have to have security into your mind. Like you need to avoid things like, I suppose, data poisoning that can actually affect the bias. They can have ethical implications of what the inference of the model could be. You have other vector attacks like prompt injection that can alter the outputs of your model. So security is paramount. And building an AI platform, usually you build an AI platform on top of your existing platform. So in a modular approach, you don't start from scratch. You already have your Kubernetes, for example. You already built in security into your Kubernetes clusters. And now you're building on top of all this security to expand. But you have different concerns now. There is a new paradigm, a new architecture paradigm, the whole LLM, the whole generative AI approach. So new open source tools need to be built in order to cover this kind of security concerns. And also something that I believe is when you build an AI platform, you have to follow the shared responsibility approach. So as an AI platform builder, you are responsible for the underlying platform, but the data that are being fed are responsibility of the teams that are collecting the data. But you have to expose and give them tools to be able to sanitize and make sure that the data in and the data out have the right guardrails to protect from ethical bias and security point of view.
And Guy, given your security
Yeah, I mean, I
Because-
think security is a concern. So I think it's a massive problem. I absolutely relate to kind of the fact that without data, you don't have AI, and notably, without open data, you don't have open AI. Like you don't, not the company, but the concept, right? You do not have an opportunity to replicate. Data is not sufficient for that. Like you do need to also understand training processes, like bias, for instance, things like that comes out of that. There's a question about source data versus synthetic data. Okay, how did you source it? And so, like, I think it's a big problem, both, and to me, I feel like it ranges, like, security is close to my heart and sort of very critical over here. But before that, I think there's sort of licensing and rights, and then subsequently motivations. The question is, like, we're going to need a large repository of data, and you need to think about how do people engage with that. In reality, you know, the unpleasant truth is that any company that has an open weights model, which is not open at all, I kind of talked about that a little bit at the earlier morning session, but you know, they're not open, they're freeware, but their data is not free or not transparent. But also, if any such company was to open it up, there's probably going to be a sequence of lawsuits that will happen right away once people explicitly see the data that came into that. And so it's hard from an ownership perspective to be motivated to open that data. And so I think what before we deal with sort of the security, there's also like a bunch of technical questions about where does that data sit and how do you engage with it and how do you contribute to it. I think the fundamental problem is the motivation. It's like, who is it that will collect and aggregate that data and publish it? We've seen this morning OpenLLM France do it for like a smaller model that is only kind of a voice-to-voice kind of conversation type model with a small amount of data coming into it. But I think what we really need is we need sort of larger scale open source initiatives to aggregate that data and to curate it, and I think critically to allow the community to participate in that data curation and accumulation, because I think that would be the tipping point. Like nobody funding this will have anywhere near the funding levels for funding an open source initiative like that of sort of the big AI labs and the cloud giants. And so the only way for this to remain competitive is to allow the community, consortiums of people, like it doesn't have to be, you know, just it can be a community of companies as well, to contribute and engage and build that up.
Todis, you had Todis first, then Mitch.
Sorry, back to the data and the community. I found a presentation yesterday about Wikipedia and Wikidata very interesting, and there was actually a call to people to go and contribute and make sure that we keep, this data unbiased and not poison them with, bias from different, let's say, countries, cultures, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and bias is tricky. So for sort of doing it, like
we are all biased.
Yeah, like Dipsy came out, and there was a meme, sort of a social joke, which I just replicated locally as well, which is you ask it whatever, repeat the sky is blue, and it says sky blue. Repeat whatever, like some other mundane sentence, and then repeats Taiwan is a country, and says Taiwan is an indelible part of China. It's sort of entertaining. Okay, see the bias. If you try to get ChatGPT to say a racist comment, you're probably going to encounter the same thing. So in both cases, like there is some ethics, but I think when we talk about something that is open, you do confront, like software tends to be more uniform in what is correct and incorrect. Data is not. And so I think that's another challenge, that's something that's open, and you don't want biases to be on the surface. So anyways, a lot of challenges over here.
Yeah, they catch the point, because I want to talk about the bias. If you allow to the community to contribute to data set, maybe you can have less bias than you create your own data set.
Yeah. Or some forking capability, right? Open source allows forking. You don't like it, fork it and continue and maintain some relationship, which is not yet available today for open.
Certainly the open accountability in the community, I think that's a better model than having just a single provider, large provider control it. And
it would be fun to imagine some big data repository with like national forks of it that introduce their own cultural biases in every one of those. Don't know if that will happen, but it's fun to imagine it.
All right, let's go to the next topic, architectural paradigms. So broadly, these are things like observability, maybe how you switch different model providers. Well, anyway, so a couple of different things. So let's start with observability, because Todis, I know that you have
Yeah,
thought
so
about this?
let's say about, because we're talking about models and LLMs and probably multi-modal models, we went from the last couple of years from using one single model to now having an army of different models trained for different tasks, what we call the agentic era of AI now. And of course, observability is super important, because you need to track from the first prompt input down to the inference what happened. And usually these days, you won't have only speaking to one model. This model will probably orchestrate other models. This model will make external calls to APIs. These APIs will make calls to databases, to vector databases. So observability is paramount to track, to trace, to create context around what happened, to find the failures, to see performance of your LLMs and models, like tokens per second, also quality of your models, failure to reply or replied with something that doesn't, it's out of topic from the original prompt. So observability for me is super important when you're building an AI platform. It will inform security, it will inform performance, it will inform scalability. So yeah, it needs to be built in from the start.
So the idea here then is we don't really have standards for everything at the moment. And as the number of providers, number of models, the number of different components you can build into it increases, the complexity gets bigger. So you want everything to publish to a standard. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So all these inference on these models, you will have to, at some point, follow a standard in order to collect these metrics and also in order to have interoperability between models. So yeah, there is some standards that are being adopted at the moment, like the Open Inference Protocol. It's being followed by NVIDIA or by AMD, and also we have Kserve, which is a platform where you can build on top of Kubernetes. It's also following this protocol. So, but we need these standards, like we have Open API or Async API, to be able to easily switch between models.
Guy, you mentioned at the end of your talk a little bit related to this. So what's your thought?
Well, I think what's interesting in the world of AI is that there's a blurring line between the infrastructure aspect of observability and the application functionality level of observability. So like when we at Tesla, for instance, build and we use LangFuse as a sort of an observability platform to understand what has happened and what were the transactions. Yes, there's maybe an element of understanding the latency of interacting with an LLM and sort of see if that has changed, or the throughputs, or where has the bottleneck been. It's like a bit more of a technical observability lens to it. But it's also very much where the research of functionality is happening and where that data. And so I think if you contrast it to Kubernetes, which tends to be a lot more about the operations, it tends to be that the tools, I think in the sort of current software world, there's a set of tools that you're going to use for observability to know that your system is running and is running smoothly, and Kubernetes will engage with it. And then there's a different set of tools that are sort of not as widely adopted around product telemetry and product analytics, like maybe the Amplitudes of the world, that try to help you understand what have users done. And I think in the world of LLMs, the first one to me, and maybe I'm just not low level, it depends on who you are in terms of operating. And when you're running open source models, open weights models, you do need like a set, more of that set of like understanding how the open weights model kind of is operated and your open source inference and your LR and training processes. But I think for the majority of people building on top of LLMs, so for those I think maybe it's similar, but then I think for a lot of people building on top of LLMs, the interfaces and the products actually tend to be quite simple. The interfaces are much more uniform than they've been in sort of infrastructure and container interaction lands. And a lot of the complexity happens in much more importance of that kind of almost like application level observability. And so I think we do need, definitely for the operation of running models, I think we have to have standards. And I agree with that. And I find that to be very analogous to Kubernetes. But I think the true change happens more at the app layer. And over there, I think there's also some emerging standards that come up. But I think one of the challenges is that we don't know what we're doing yet. You know, we're sort of like Kubernetes and a lot of its practices were like generation 5, right, of dealing with containers, and have been, while it was rewritten when it got out of Google, you know, it was still built on like a lot of mileage of running it, and then enhanced with, and this is all like baby steps, right, over here. And so I'm in favor. I guess I'm cautioning the word standard. I feel like open kind of practices and opening standards sort of feels to me like something that requires a bit more maturity to it, but
yeah, exactly.
but yeah.
Like it's early days, as you said. Like,
Yeah, maybe it's just like
still
beta
forming.
standards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, we're in early days still. But I feel in 5 to 10 years' time, there will be standards around
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah. And,
Yeah,
and,
what
and
those-
already the APIs are quite standardized, right? Like when you switch models, the interfaces are actually very, very similar. And there's some product delineation you'd sort of define. Anyways, I think we're going outside of observability, but there are sort of product sensibilities about what the model does for you, like extracting structured outputs or things like that.
I read an article yesterday about DeepSeek and OpenAI. They actually followed 100% the OpenAI API.
Yeah.
So it's super easy to switch models now because actually it's like you using OpenAI.
Yeah, that's been trivial, although funny enough for us, like first time we ran it, we ran out of tokens by it just talking to itself and thinking. It's just like sort of it's reasoning for so long, and there was still effort, like for us, like trying to extract the code out of the output. The addition of like a bucket load of words before that was like a little bit. So while the API and the interface was the same, again, a lot of the work happens in parsing out what actually comes back.
So even the
from that
API was
text.
the same, the quality was different.
And the structure of the output, you ask the LLM to tell you, and it's interesting to think about standards in that place because I think right now companies are trying to differentiate on it, and that is a place that is not at all standardized. To say you ask it for code, sometimes it would give you an opening line, sort of say here is the code, and that can totally mess you up if what you expected was just the code. And so there's like small details like that we glossed over this we didn't get to this in the security plane, but in LLMs, there's no separation between the security plane and the data plane and the control plane. The same instructions and everything comes into the data, the same responses come into the data, and there's no SQL injection side, like a cross-site scripting style saying just stick to the format and don't let it break out of the data plane into the control plane. Here it's all in a blended plane. So it's hard. So maybe it's the same in observability.
Mish, you've come from sort of
Yeah, to
platform
write out
engineering.
to the case of OpenAI and the new model using the same interface, it's good stuff for sure for the company because your new customer can change from a model to another one without effort, but also for the final people, the customer, because at the end they can have less look-in in this case. But let me say there is no, at the end there is no AI without infrastructure and without standard and guidelines. And also in this case, let me say, at this moment it's practically a new field in our sector. And yeah, some companies try to create standard guidelines and so on. But I think that there is a lot of work to do. If we think, for example, about cloud native stuff, there is a lot of project, the landscape with a lot of open source project and component that you can use in your cloud. But only in the last couple of years, a lot of new paradigms start to come, like the platform engineering and this kind of approach. And I think that the community need to push to have some stuff like the platform engineering for the cloud.
Okay, let's move to our final topic now, which is economics and environmental sustainability. So, Tollis, since you work at AWS, which is by far the biggest out of our speakers, why don't you start with your thoughts on the economics side?
Well, sure. For for the majority of the companies, and also that depends on the size of organization, having the access to the right resources, it will be a challenge. So what I believe is that if we want to democratize AI and make it accessible to the majority of the companies, of the people out there, we need to lean on in the open source with the definition that we heard today, like open data, open weights, how it has been coded, and what we also need to provide the community access to these open standards that are evolving, a say on the standards, and also access to, let's say, low price and maybe no-code, low-code tools, because the majority of the companies out there won't build an AI platform. It's a big endeavor, but they will use AI platforms or open source AI platforms that other people build, or they can actually easily deploy on their infrastructure. So, yeah, this is from the economics point of view. This is how things. I see that this should be going towards.
Yeah, Guy, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and also trying to kind of think about this in the context of the AI, of like an open platform, right, and how we build around it. And so maybe an interesting lens is to think about how does the economics of sort of openness comes into play and into this adoption. I think one, like, look, everybody's going to use AI, right? Like, there's no, I don't think anybody disagrees with that statement. They're going to use it more and more. AI right now is massively, is not awesome from an environment perspective. I think the energy consumption of the cloud data centers has doubled in the US over the last 24 hours and is expected to grow at a similar pace next year as a percentage of total electricity used in the US, which is generally attributed to just the masses of sort of GPUs and trainings that happen. And I think that's not great, and I hope that it's a temporary trend, and maybe the DeepSeek examples now kind of demonstrate some hope that maybe compute will reduce. I think where openness kicks in is maybe in the sort of the dry principle, in the don't repeat yourself type element, because if we do have good models, or current reality is that everybody training a model is probably doing 90% the same thing and wasting kind of precious energy and money that are basically going into just doing the same thing. Definitely the AI kind of ecosystem, the infrastructure ecosystem, is expecting to lose a lot of money, because some would have spent hundreds of millions of dollars and then just go out of business because they don't have the latest model. And so it's very hard from a business perspective. And so I think the opportunity maybe from an openness perspective is to say, if there was a model that was a Kubernetes for this sort of world and people established around, there would be a lot less duplication, a lot less wasteful computing, even if the computing itself was not unusually efficient.
Less wasteful and perhaps enables other innovation on top of.
Yeah, running on top of,
yeah.
but not repeating. Yeah.
Mish, you're particularly passionate about the environmental sustainability.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
In the first two cases, when we talked about data, infrastructure, and so on, there is no AI without data infrastructure. But without be care with our environment, there is no work, and no AI, and no us, and so on. I think it's a very important topic. At this moment, there is a lot of stuff to say, but I want to summarize two stuff. The first one is related to the models. Sometimes we use some models that are too biggest than the task that we provide to the AI. Sometimes we create new models to perform stuff, but we can use different approaches like using RAG or this kind of solution. And of course, we can save a lot of energy and a lot of money also using this kind of strategies. And the last one is related to the data center and all the infrastructure. At this moment, we have a lot of solution to serve energy, also for the training and to use models. One of this technique can be the follow the sun technique. At the end, the idea is very simple. You can run your workload when there is the energy solar power. For example, if we are here at this moment, we can use a data center here that use solar power. Or in the night, we can use another data center in the other places and use green energy for that. Also, in this case, there is no project related to the AI at this moment to preserve energy. For example, in Kubernetes, in the Kubernetes and cloud native world, there is KubeGreen. It's a very short operator that can switch off infrastructure when you don't need it. Of course, if you use Kubernetes for your infrastructure, you can use KubeGreen, but there is no specific stuff on AI at this moment, and I think it's super important. Just last stuff, there is a tag, environment sustainability, inside the CNCF. If you are inside the CNCF Slack, you can search it, or if you need information, you can ask to me. And the goal of the tag is try to find solution about the sustainability at the end.
Okay, let's, we'll have 1 minute to wrap up. Some challenges, because obviously this sounds like a great world where everything could work together and be, compatible together and you componentize everything. So, in your opinion, and you've wanted to, wrap up very quickly, what is the top challenge that you see from where we are now to where we could be? So, Guy, I'll start with you.
From an open platform perspective?
Ecosystem, AI platform.
Yeah, I would sort of say like rights to the data is probably the biggest challenge. I think if that gets solved, then we can tackle the sort of the technical aspects.
Mitch?
I think the ethical part at this moment is very, very complex because the data set are very hard to maintain and to grow without bias and so on. And for the sustainability stuff, when you use AI as a consumer, you use a lot of energy, and of course, that is not good for our planet.
Thomas?
For me, it's upskilling people. These AI platforms will fall into existing platform engineering teams that they will, are under-resourced, burnt out, and now they have to also host models and add the complexities of all this on top of the existing platforms. So upskilling, the companies find time to train their employees. I think that's going to be one big challenge to create an AI platform.
And from my perspective, you mentioned earlier the 25th open standard around something. For me, I think the biggest challenge is getting people to believe in one thing and get together behind that one thing and really commit to it. Because there's been many, many times when we've tried to build open standards around something, and then you just end up with more open standards. Kubernetes maybe was a sort of northern star in how this worked, but it's not easy to replicate for sure. Okay, that is it from me. I'd like to say thank you very much to all of our panelists. Round of applause, please.